Welcome to the radio broadcast of Bethesda Household of Prayer, where Elder Donald R. Jones is pastor. We want you to open your hearts and your minds as you feed on God's Word. Brought to you today by Pastor Donald R. Jones. Here is Pastor Jones.
The insane asylum, not knowing who they are. There were some of us who woke up in the hospital dazed and confused and lost and wondering if we're going to ever see our families again. There are some people who woke up under the bridge hungry and cold and hot and freezing, and everything happened to them at the same time. But God saw fit to put you amongst a body of believers praising and worshiping him. What a magnificent God who's able. I want to talk to you this morning about what's in a friend. You know, I've heard so many people define friendship, and I've seen so many people. You know, we oftentimes have a tendency to call people friends who are not really friends. You see, because someone speaks a kind word to you or because someone hangs out with you, that don't necessarily make them a friend. You see, they are friends and they're associates. And I remember when I was in school studying geometry that there's interphasing. That's when two circles hit one another. And they're intersecting, and that means when two circles intersect with one another. You see, it's that intersection that we got to be careful of. It's that intersection should only happen with friends. That interphasing can happen with associates. Why is that so important? Because a friend is a rare commodity. A friend is a rare thing. You can count your friends on your fingers. You can count your friends on your finger. And a friend is a jewel that's so magnificent, that's so shining. A friend is a jewel that binds a relationship. We got to stop calling everybody friends and know the difference, because everybody is not your friend. And I want to give it. See, God is a wonderful God. God is a magnificent God. You see, when you want to know something, go to God's Word. When you want to understand something, go to God's Word. God gives us a story of a true friendship. A friendship that has been tested by the annals of time. And I'll never forget, about 30 years ago, I was having this Bible discussion with an associate of mine. You know, when you're young, you're dumb and you're stupid. You think you're brilliant and you're smart. But life experiences teach you that you're young, dumb, and stupid. Because as you get older, you start to examine and review things, and you look at them a little different. I remember we had this big debate, this friend of mine, Brian and I were standing in front of the house talking about the Bible, and he said something. He said, man, you know, that's a homosexual relationship. I said, you sure? And it's nothing, I mean, I'm not pro or con, that's between the person and God. But 30 years ago, the norms today were not the norms. All right? See, sometimes we deal in contemporary times and we don't deal with history enough. So we're sitting talking about it, and I said, I don't think so. I don't quite think so. And as I went back and I read it, I found out that there's a difference between a friend and an associate. And I want you to look at this. This is the story of a young boy. And overnight, he becomes a success. He becomes the most famous person in the nation. And everybody wants to be around him. Everybody wants to be in his company. Everybody wants to give him this. They want to give him that. And man, he's just like the idol of the nation. If you'll take like an Elvis Presley and a Muhammad Ali and a George Patton and put all three together, this is what this young man represented at a young age. He had the fame of a Muhammad Ali and a Elvis Presley, and he had the R. Kelly, whoever y'all deal with today. He had all that fame and all that, and then he had the strategic capacity of a Patton or an Eisenhower. So this kid, God had gifted him. He was brilliant. As a matter of fact, he had never wore a uniform before. He had never fought a military battle before. And what happened is that God used him to defeat the giant Goliath. Now, Goliath was a 10 or 12-foot monstrosity, and everybody was afraid of Goliath. And remember, Goliath for 40 days and 40 nights called the Israelites and challenged them and say, come out here. And Goliath got so bold and so bad, he said, I'll tell you what, if one of your guys can beat me, the whole army will surrender to you. And the Israelites were in panic and they was afraid. And this young boy, David, based on his relationship with God, steps up to the plate, and he defeats the giant. And he becomes the idol overnight. Overnight, he gains this celebrity, he gains this success, he gains this respect, and everybody wants to be with David. Everybody wants to be around David, but one person. One person knew in his heart that David was the heir apparent. And he made it up his mind out of jealousy and envy. Pay attention, jealousy and envy. So there are going to be people who are going to be around you, and they're going to profess to be your friend. And they're going to be full of envy, jealousy, and resentment. But because of who you are and where you are, they're going to want to be around you. But that they harbor that animosity, that anger, that resentment, and oftentimes they want to be you. But there's only one you. You see, God anointed David as a young age. You sort of remember when David's father brought all the boys out there to Samuel. Samuel said, no, not this one. No, not this one. Oh, this one's handsome. Oh, this one's smart. This one's fine. Samuel said, no, not any of these. There has to be another. So God anointed David as a little child. And there are going to be things that God's going to anoint you to do in your life, and other people are going to be jealous of it. They're going to be envious of it. And they're going to always be conniving and manipulating the circumstances and the situations because they want to be you. And that's why understanding what a true friend is so important. You see, there's nothing wrong with having associates. I have a lot of associates, but I only have a handful of friends. I only have a handful of people that I can call friends. And I want you to see this story. And God, I just love how God puts it. God takes the existing king, and with all that jealousy, all that animosity, and pretending that David is a favorite of his, but all the time he harbors that animosity, that resentment, that anger, and that jealousy because he thinks that he should remain in a position. And then you have David over here, unsuspecting, unknowing, but God also gives him character discernment to be able to see. And then you have the king's son over here, Jonathan. What a magnificent triangle. God says here's the king that harbors all the resentment, all the animosity, all of the jealousy, and here is the son. And in this particular case, the oak didn't fall from the tree. The oak became his own tree, independent and different from the original tree. And it's so important for us to grab and understand this and realize that those acquaintances, those people who are in our lives for a season, let them be in that life for a season and let them be an acquaintance. Don't try to make them into something permanent because they may only be in your life for a season. God may only have them in your life temporarily. And as we look at this story, Jonathan and David are going to teach us the true value of friendship. Jonathan and David are going to teach us what a true friend is. Jonathan and David are going to teach us how to find a true friend. And you know how you find a true friend? First of all, by being a true friend. You want a true friend? You learn how to be a true friend. Go to the book of Samuel, 1 Samuel chapter 18, and I want you to see something. 1 Samuel chapter 18, verse 1. The soul of Jonathan and Saul is just unique. You see, when you have a true friend, your soul yokes to that person's soul. It's a covenant relationship. It's a relationship, it's a blood relationship. Look at this. Now, you got the story of Saul, David, and Samuel. You remember, David is this great hero now because Israel has been losing battles. They have been attacked, and David has this status. Now, watch this. 1 Saul 18 and 1. Now, it came to pass when he had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David. And Jonathan loved him as himself. You see that? You see, you want to know when a person is a friend? When they love you like they love themselves, that's a friend. When they love you like they love themselves, that's a friend. Jonathan and David's soul was knitted to one another. Jonathan and David became what you call soul brothers. Jonathan loved David as he loved himself. That's the question you have to ask yourself. Who in this world is it that you love like you love yourself? And then you will know who your true friend really is. And then you will know who you can be a true friend to. David and Jonathan, there was a bind there. They became so close, their souls were knitted together. You see, the easiest thing in the world is to call a person a friend. See, you can't really become a friend to someone else till you're a friend to yourself. Do you realize that? You have to be a friend to yourself first. And let me tell you something else. You can't love nobody until you love yourself. You can't hate yourself and love somebody. Those things are incompatible. Think about it. You can't hate everything that you are. You can't hate the way you think. You can't hate the way you look. You can't hate the way you walk and then say you love somebody else. That's logically inconsistent. You have to love yourself before you can love anybody else. Now that goes against conventional wisdom. You see, because you can't share love till you understand love. Now, I'm not talking about self-centered love where you look in the mirror and say, mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the greatest of it? I'm not talking about that kind of love. That's self-centered love. I'm talking about a love that lets you know that you're okay and the other person is okay. I'm talking about a love that transcends jealousy. See, when you love yourself, you're not going to be jealous of yourself. And when you love someone else, you're not going to be jealous of them. As a matter of fact, you're going to always want the best for them. You're going to want, and you're going to want the best for them so much that you're going to be willing to put yourself on the line. Ask yourself who in this world, outside of your children or your spouse, that you would put yourself on the line for. There are not many people, are they? There are not many people that if you're on that Titanic and there are only 3 life jackets and you, your wife, and your kid are on that boat and your so-called friend is on that boat, there are 4 you guys. Who will you give those life jackets to? Tough question, isn't it? Yes. That's how you can tell who's a true friend. Because the best scenario is to give that life jacket to your wife and your kid, and the other one to your friend. Because you're willing to make the sacrifice. Now that's hard to do. And remember, Jesus gave us the example. None of the apostles will put their life on the line for Jesus. But yet they all called him friend. They all called him Messiah. And what I'm sharing with you today, stop calling everybody your friend. They're acquaintances of yours. There are people you hang out with. There are people you may do business with. They may even be people you like. But if you're not willing to make the ultimate sacrifice for them, they're not your friend, and you're not their friend. And that's why it's so important that we understand this concept of friendship. You can't say a person is your friend when they do what you want them to do. You can't say a person is your friend until they tell you no. And you can't say a person is your friend because they have decided to hang out with you. A person that's a friend, you're willing to make the ultimate sacrifice for them because you have what you call a covenant relationship. Look at 1 Samuel 18:3. I want you to see there's something, there's a contract. Do we understand there's a contract and there's a covenant? A covenant happens. A covenant is almost like a blood oath. It's a soul knitting commitment. That's why marriage is supposed to be a covenant. And that's why it's so important for you not to choose who you marry, to let God choose who you marry. Because when God chooses who you marry, it's going to be a covenant relationship. When you choose who you marry, don't be surprised as it turns out to be a contract. Don't be surprised when you choose who you marry that it doesn't turn out to be a contract. What do you mean by that, Pastor? Something that you or that person want to break. But when God yokes you to that person, the souls are yoked, and it's a covenant. It's a blood combination that comes together. Know the difference. Look at 1 Samuel 18:3. Then Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as himself. You can't make a covenant. You see, God made that covenant with Abraham. God loved Abraham. God made that covenant with David. God loved David. You can't make a covenant with somebody you don't love. You cannot make a covenant with somebody you don't love. Now, you can make a contract, and we do it every day because contracts can be broken. Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as he loved himself. Now, watch this. And this is important. Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was on him and gave it to David, with his armor, including his sword and his bow and his belt. That's important. You remember I told you that Jonathan was David's son? That was a royal robe. That robe signified who was going to be the heir apparent. So Jonathan says, I love you so much, David. I'm going to turn this over to you. That armor had the royal signet on it. That armor says that this is the armor of the king. That belt said that this belt binds the armor and the robe together. So what Jonathan did something that you and I wouldn't do. Jonathan gives up his heritage to David. What would you give up to a friend or for a friend? Jonathan said, for all practical reasons, what my father is trying to pledge to me, with all the jealousy, all the envy, all the spite, David, I'm going to give it to you. Because what my father thinks about you it's not as important as what I think about you. So David goes into this covenant relationship with Jonathan. And Jonathan goes into this covenant relationship with David. And that's how you can tell. You see, that covenant relationship is also based on loyalty. It's based on a commitment. You have to be willing to love someone like you love yourself, to call them a friend. Otherwise, it's not a true friendship, it's an association. And God demonstrates this to us. He demonstrates it to us plain and clear, and he brings it to us in such a way. And it's so important. You see, in a friendship, there's loyalty. Think about it. In a friendship, you're willing to make sacrifices for that person that one doesn't normally make. And that's why it's so important. And that's why we understand it. And that's why Proverbs 18:24 tells us, some friendships do not last, but some friendships that are based on loyalty do. You see, when you have a friend, you're going to be loyal to that person. And that person is going to be loyal to you. Because loyalty is essential. You see, if you can't trust someone, how can you be a friend with them? If you got to ask yourself over and over, I was asked a question the other day, can you really trust this guy? And I was asking about two people that I have a lot of confidence in. And I told them I think I could trust them. Now, they don't trust him, and they got their reasons for not trusting him. And I'm fine with that. But when they asked me, could I trust him? What I went back to is when he and I were little boys, and nobody wanted to play with us, and nobody wanted to interface with us, we yoked then. And when I got in trouble, of all the people, he was there to bail me out. I'm talking years ago, 14, 15. And when he got in trouble, I was there to bail him out. So I know in my heart that based upon that, and I know that people can be bought, people can be sold, but I have a certain degree of confidence that when it comes to me, those rules that applies in other situations, he'll hesitate on because I've seen him do it. And that's why it's so important that we understand that loyalty is an intricate part of a friendship. And without loyalty, you cannot have a true friendship. You can have an acquaintance. And that's why it's so important for you and I. You see, you can choose to be loyal even if another person isn't loyal. I'll say it again. You can choose to be loyal even if the other person isn't loyal. You can choose to be a friend even if the other person isn't willing to choose to be a friend, because the choice is yours. You can decide for yourself whether or not you want to be associated with that person in that intersection. Remember I told you earlier, there's interphasing. That's what you do with acquaintances. And you're going to have hundreds of those. You're going to interface with people every day of your life. So that's an acquaintance. But when you intersect, make sure that you're not bringing anybody into your sphere of influence that is not going to be as loyal to you as you are to them. And that's why intersection is so important. They have husband and wives who are acquaintances. They have husbands and wives who are acquaintances. They have husband and wives who have been married for 40 years. The husband sleeps in one room, the wife sleeps in another. And on the outside, you think they have a perfect, normal relationship. They have the perfect, happy-go-lucky family. And they're acquaintances. Yes. Because they have had a contract. They made a contract of convenience. And that's why it's so important that we allow God to allow the friends in life. Do you think it was an accident that Jonathan and David became friends? God isn't a God of accident. Do you realize if you go back a couple of chapters, I think it's chapter 16 if memory serves me correct, that Jonathan got so tired of running from the Philistines. He got so tired of hiding that he prayed and he asked God, and he took 20 men with him and he went over there, and God gave him a great victory over hundreds of Philistines. Do you think that was an accident? God isn't no God of accident. And you know how David's soul could be knitted to Jonathan's soul, and Jonathan's soul could be knitted to David's soul? You remember I told you earlier that all the Philistines, they were trembling. Goliath was up there mocking them, saying, you dog, you dirty Israelite. He was calling them all kind of things. And Jonathan decides, look, I'm going to sneak in here and I'm going to kill as many of them if I can with God's blessing. That took courage. That took faith. When your dad and the whole army are frightened and afraid, and here you step out on faith, and God gives you a tremendous victory, because God was preparing his heart for what he was going to see. God was preparing his heart for what he was going to see when this little bitty boy, who's no part of the army, steps up and kills the giant. So their hearts were knitted together. You see, when you have a friend, your soul and their heart are going to be knitted together. And it's not an accident. God has allowed something to happen in their life, and God allows something to happen in your life. So when everybody else can't see it, there's a knitting of the souls and a coming together of the hearts. And when everybody else is telling you, no, 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 and everybody else is telling you, you can't, and everybody else is telling you it's not going to happen, that person is going to be there with you. That person is going to stand there with you. That person is going to be there regardless of what's going on. And every time David got in a jam, because remember, Saul became like a terrorist. He put a hitman out on David. He put a hitman out and said, look, whoever get him, they're going to get this reward. And just a couple of years earlier, he was saying whoever can help us win the battle will have a reward. You see how friends go and they create situations where the highest bidder can do their bidding? Always. They're going to go to the highest bidder. And you know what happened here? Regardless of how many people Saul tried to buy, it didn't matter, because God had knitted Jonathan and David's heart, and God had someone inside of Saul's camp that was his son, that every time he had these fantastic plans, he had these fantastic plots, he had all of this set up, God allowed Jonathan to make his way to David and warn him. Warn him against his father, the king. Under any other circumstances, Jonathan would have been viewed as a traitor. But God had something to do for Jonathan that was higher ranked than the classification of traitor. God had Jonathan in a position where he and David's souls were knitted together for God's purposes. You see, when God brings a friend in your life, he's going to knit your soul and your heart together for his purposes, not yours. So when you step back and look at Jonathan's actions, you're asking yourself, how could Jonathan give away the kingdom? Because Jonathan knew that the kingdom wasn't his anyway. You don't think that those people knew that that boy was anointed? You don't think that they knew that God had chosen that boy from his youth? And when God chooses you, regardless of what anybody else thinks, regardless of what anybody else is doing, where God guides, he provides. Go to 1 Samuel chapter 20, verse 41. I want you to see something. You see, I want you to see the knitting together. How God knits things together. When God has a purpose for you, when God has a plan for you, he's going to bring people into your life that are going to be there to support what you have to do, that God has given you to do, and somebody in that group will become knitted to you, because you're going to always have to have somebody that's going to stand up and look out for you when you can't do it yourself. Watch this. Saul has set this trap for David, but watch this. When the lad was gone, that's the lad that they were supposed to shoot the arrows at. Then David rose from the south and fell on his face to the ground and bowed 3 times, and they kissed each other as they wept together. So Jonathan has warned David, be weary of this. But David wept the more. And Jonathan said to David, go in safety, insomuch as we have sworn to each other in the name of the Lord, saying, the Lord will be between me and you, and between my descendants and your descendants forever. Then he rose and departed, and Jonathan went back into the city. You see what they say there? They didn't say this relationship is based upon us. Look what he says. Go in safety insomuch as we have sworn to each other in the name of the Lord, saying that the Lord will be between me and you. You remember I told you about that intersecting? When that intersection comes from a relationship with Christ, then God is in the middle of it. And when God is in the middle of it, nobody can separate it. And that's why it's so important for you and I, because we need encouragement. David reached another point in 1 Samuel 23 where he needs to be encouraged. And you know what happens? Jonathan comes out and encourages him. And there are going to be times when you need encouragement. And there are going to be times when you need a believer to validate for you that where you're going and what you're doing, God has anointed you and appointed you to do that. The Bible tells us in the book in Proverbs, iron sharpens iron. See, David and Jonathan were sharpening one another. When you have a real friend, they're going to sharpen you, you're going to sharpen them. And that's so important. And God is saying to you and I, when I bring you together, when I pull you together, ain't going to be somebody trying to pull you down. Let me tell you something. When you find people who are constantly trying to break you down, trying to tear you down, that the only thing that they can tell you is something negative, they are not your friend. When you find people, and oftentimes they can be loved ones, when you find people trying to tear you down, trying to break you down, they're not your friend. When everything that comes out of their mouth is negative, they're not your friend. Because you know what? A friend will bring out the best in you, not the worst. A friend will make you a better being by being around them, not a worse being by being around them. A friend will motivate you to be your best or to do your best, not less. A friend will always lift you up, not tear you down. A friend will always speak the truth to you, but they'll always speak power into your life. They'll always encourage you. Jonathan and David's soul were knit together, and Jonathan loved David as he loved himself. They were knitted together to a relationship with Jesus Christ. And what I'm saying to you is that if you want to know who a friend is, you see, when everybody else run out of the house, a friend's going to run in the house. When everything is topsy-turvy, when everything is going against you, When everybody's plotting against you, when you feel depressed, when you feel lonely, a true friend who's knitted to your heart, who's knitted to your soul is going to reach out to them, and they're going to come there and they're going to encourage you. Because when everybody else is leaving out, they're going to come in. And that's how you know you have a friend. And that's how you can be a friend. Because when God yokes you, when God brings you together, they're always going to stick together regardless of what else is going on. They're going to be all kind of things that are going on in life. Don't be fooled by that. Life is going to always have ups and downs. Life is going to be like a roller coaster. But those handful of people that speak truth and power into your life, God yokes you to them. They may not be the most handsome. They may not be the finest. I was at a 70th anniversary party last night. Someone I haven't seen in years came up and talked to me. And you know what he said? He said, man, it's so good to see you. I haven't seen you in a long time. You been taken care? And he said, I heard A, B, C, D, E. And I said, yeah, that's true. He said, hey, man, give me a call so I can help you. Another person I hadn't seen in years, the first thing that came out of his mouth was, man, you picked up a lot of weight over these years. You see what I'm saying? A friend is going to find something good to say to you. A friend's going to lift you up. A friend's not going to tear you down. All I could do was walk away from him. Here I'm helping Miss Vidora celebrate her 70th birthday. Bro, I don't want you to come dump all that negative on me. I know I picked up 80 pounds over the last couple of years. Don't you think I'm trying to take it off? I need you to come and tell me, hey, man, look like you lost a few pounds. Give me some encouragement. I'm telling me, hey, man, look like you picked up a lot of weight over the years. Yeah, look at the mirror. I have a wife that tells me, hey, doc, you got to take off some pounds. You know, you're not going to be around here, taking care of your husbandly duties with all those pounds on you. I'm serious. I'm saying, now that's an encouragement. She's encouraging me. You need to take off some of this weight so you can take care of your husbandly duties. That's an encouragement. That's an incentive for those of us who are men and women. See, you want a friend. You want someone who's going to encourage you. You want someone who God has knitted to you. First Lady's out of town in Georgia, so I know she's looking, so I got to put something in there about her. So I got to put something there. They're enjoying themselves. They're having a good time. They got a little sister trip. That's good. You see, look, and I know we're on overtime because they're telling me in the booth, but look, sometimes it's good to take a little time off to yourself and go hang out. You get you a couple of friends. Don't get so caught up in this world where you can't enjoy yourself. God made all of this for you and I to enjoy ourselves. I want to close with this. I read a story about a young man by the name of Christopher Carr. Christopher was walking home one day when he noticed another student from the class walking home, and this kid was carrying all of his books. And it was like a Friday. Who takes all their books home out of lock on a Friday? I know I didn't. I was on my way up to USL on Friday, or LSU. It was USL back then. I don't know what they call it today. Off the Southeastern. But anyway, Christopher saw this kid bringing all of his books home and asked himself, who takes all their books home? And then he saw something happen. He saw some other kids run by the kid and just knock his books out of his hands and knock him down and just start laughing and making fun of him. And Christopher walks over and he picks the kid up and he picks his books up and he asks him, is he all right? And he walks him home and he walks him home and he's talking to him and they develop an initial acquaintance. And then Christopher, who is okay, he's in the right crowds, he started to take the young man to football games with him. He started to take him to dance with him. He just starts to hang out with him. And he starts to make the other people know that this new kid who have come from the private parochial school to the public school, he's all right. And this little kid, as someone said earlier, he's a borderline genius. And he's like the valedictorian of the class, and he's the everybody now accepts him. But there was a time when they didn't. And in his valedictorian speech, he says something that I think should touch you, and I think it should touch me. He tells this story. He says, look, I just want to tell this story, and I want to let everyone know that on this particular day, something happened to me. And something happened to me at school that made me decide that I wanted to take all my books out of the locker. And then something else happened to me that very same day that made me realize that I was going to continue studying these books. And he said, I want to share it with you. He said, the reason I was carrying my books home was because I planned to kill myself. He said, and I cleaned out my closet, I cleaned out my locker because I didn't want my mother to have to suffer the pain of cleaning out my locker for me after I had taken my life. And he said, and he looked at Chris and he said, Chris, you saved my life that day by becoming my friend. And the gasps went over the whole crowd, just like it's here. And he said, Chris, you were popular and you were handsome and everybody wanted to be with you. He said, I was a book nerd and I was a brand new kid in the school and everybody wanted to pick on me. And he said, you stopping and picking up my books and talking to me gave me hope. He said, we became friends. And he said, people started to accept me. And he said, it's so important. Sometimes we don't realize that all that a person needs is encouragement. And he said, on that day, by walking me home, he gave me encouragement. And those two boys have had a lifelong friendship. And they continue to enjoy one another today. Pastor, where are you going with that? You want a friend? Learn how to be a friend. Because God may be opening up a door for you to be a friend to someone and you don't know what they're going through. And Jesus is saying to you and I that I am your friend. I give you unconditional love. And you know what a friend does? A friend gives you unconditional love. It's not dependent on this. It's not dependent on that. It's dependent on the fact that your soul and their soul are knitted together, that your heart and their heart are knitted together. And when you feel something, they feel it. When you feel hurt, they feel it. When you feel joy, they feel it. When you feel pleasure, they feel it. When you feel pain, they feel it. You ever found that sometimes you might be having a little pain and somebody calls you that's a friend of yours and you say, well, how did they know? How did they know? Because your soul and your heart and their soul and their heart are knitted together in a covenant relationship that only God can connect. Do you receive that message? I think we're developing a David-Jonathan relationship there. One runs and the other one runs behind them. One falls and then the other one falls. Amen?
You have been listening to Pastor Donald R. Jones of Bethesda Household of Prayer. We hope the word was nourishing to your soul and gave you a better understanding of God's love and grace. We want to encourage you to get into a Bible-based teaching church. And if you are in the New Orleans area, visit us at 7601 Westbank Expressway, Marrero, Louisiana. Thanks to you and your financial support, thousands have heard today's message. If you'd like to receive a copy of today's message, we can be reached at 504-348-0132. We are Bethesda Household of Prayer. Jesus loves you, and so do we. Join us next time, and be blessed.